Hi everybody. This video series will describe how to use Twine to be able to create some interactive nonlinear stories. So a Twine is an open source tool and interactive storytelling tool. Similar to a more simplistic version of a game engine, but it uses HTML and cascading style sheets to be able to build that interactivity. We're going to use the website twinery.org, so that's what I pulled up here. If you go to twinery.org, you can open this up. One thing I will start by saying is that it is going to work as expected in Google Chrome. It can have issues of the Twine files not loading or not being able to be edited if you use other web browsers such as Safari or Firefox. But I know for certain that it is going to work as expected in Chrome. So Twine has two options. You can use the in web browser version, or called Use Online, a button up here, or you can download it for Windows, Mac, or Linux. You can use a download standalone software, but we're just going to use the Use It Online. The only difference is that if you want to save this out, take it someplace else, if you're using the Use It Online version, you have to download that HTML file, save it, and then upload it or carry it with you. So that would be the only difference. Other than that, the online version saves all of your interactive stories with Twine in your web browser, pending that you don't delete your cookies and history on your web browser. So you don't have to save anything down to your local computer. You can just keep it in your web browser. Just make sure you don't delete the history or your cookies. So this is the start screen for the Use It on the Web version. I don't have any stories created, so we're going to create some from scratch and talk about some simple ways to create some interactivity. So you can choose import from file if you have a pre-existing HTML file that has been created with Twine. But we're going to click the plus symbol beside story and create a new one. So we're going to say interactive test story. Okay. So this will be the name of your Twine. So you can name it whatever you might want to there. Okay, so this is what an individual Twine will look like. If I go back to the story list, this is what the preview will look like as default. It'll take the date it was originally created or last updated. So if you already have one in your story list, you can click on it and it will show you the individual Twine. So Twine is set up as like a visual graph interactive story setup, so you don't actually have to do or visualize the screen as a full line of code. We will get to some of the code here in a minute, and yes, you still need to code some of the basic lines in order for it to work properly. But as far as to create things in an interactive way, but it visualizes the connection of the story in these visual nodes that Twine will call passages. So if I click on that passage, this is the starting passage. I'll come back to that here in a minute. You can move it around the screen here, and we see we have the a lot of workspace that we can play with as well. So the main screen is the passage screen, and then down here where it says interactive test story, that's my name of my file. Here's where we can edit more background code like the style sheet, the JavaScript to do more complex things. We can turn on things like snap to grid. So as I move it around, it'll snap to the points of, or the grid points of the background. So that was the snap to grid option. We have like story statistics. We can publish the file, which is how we would save our file out to send to someone else. It saves an HTML file out. The bottom right, we have a quick find. So if you have hundreds of individual passages, you can find one quickly by just typing in the name of that passage. We have the scale of our viewport as well. Find out where it went. There it is. From being really close up to really far away. So the larger your interactive stories, the more you want to zoom out. We have a test, test to make sure the code is working properly, and then play. So right now we don't have anything. We also have a plus passage, which creates a new passage, but just doesn't connect them up. So that'll be part of what we'll be doing here in a minute. You can also click on a passage and delete that passage as well. Click delete. All right, so that is the overall setup of Twine. Let's create a couple of passages connected up with some simple code. And then the next video we'll move around to some other complex things like adding images, changing text color, size, and background. All right, so in the original passage, if you look at the passage, there is a little green icon, looks like a spaceship. This is going to indicate what the starting passage is. The very first page of your interactive story is going to be on. So when you hit play, it's going to start with this untitled passage. And I know that because that little green icon is there. It also says double click this passage to edit it. So if I double click this, it doesn't have a name. So we can simply say story start or whatever we might want to call this passage. One thing that is important when we're doing any kind of code, but especially with Twine, is to make sure you know how you're typing it out. If you put a space or an underscore or no space, you need to know that. So this passage name is going to be story space start. That's important to know when we recall this passage back later. We have some other things that we'll get to later on, like tags, but underneath that is what the page actually displays. So we can type something in here. Hello, this is the start of our story. This is a story about 3 kids. Okay, so we'll leave it there. All right, if I click off of that, it updates the preview icon there of my passage. And now I can go play test this. So there's a couple ways I can play test. I can go hit the play button on the bottom right, and it'll open it up in a new tab, and it shows me, hello, this is the start of our story. This is a story about 3 kids. So this shows you exactly what I just typed out. As default, it's going to have white text on a black background. We can change that later. So it is important to note, if I just come back here and play again, it's going to try to update this same tab, which it's going to cache that information, so it may not update it properly if you just leave this tab open and come back and hit play again. So instead, close that tab out. If we want to make an adjustment to this, come in here. So we'll say list of 3 kids. We'll come back and add that later. If I update that passage and hit play, it will create a new tab and reload from the updated content. So close the tab, go back and make your adjustments, and hit the play button again. You can also hit play from a particular passage. So if I have 20 different passages, I can left click on that passage and hit the test story starting here button. That doesn't change the starting story passage. That just starts the playable option, the testing option from that particular passage. But also show you the testing debug screen as well if there's any errors or anything. So that'll do the same thing as if I hit the test button. I'll show you my visible debug errors as well. All right, so test shows me if there's any errors. Play is this, as if it what would look like if the your player, your audience would click on it. Play is exactly what the audience will see. All right, so that's interesting, but we want to create secondary passages. We want to make this a story, so we're going to create secondary passages, as in we're going to create buttons from this first passage, this first page, that then link to other pages. Simple stories start with, well, this is the beginning of the story. That leads to the next story element. We can say something like the story continues here, ... Okay. And we're going to want to change this into a button. So in order to make this a clickable text button that leads us to a secondary passage, on the left side of the text, we're going to hit 2 straight brackets. That's the key just to the right of the P key. So that's the straight brackets there. 2 straight brackets, 2 left straight brackets on the left side of the text. We go all the way to the right side and do 2 right brackets. Okay. That will color coordinate them once you add the 2 left and the 2 right ones on there. And what that will do is change this text, the story continues here, ... into a clickable text button. If I click off of this now, what I visualize and see is that it creates a secondary passage that is titled this. The story continues here, ... So let's go play. If I hit play now, the first two texts is just simple text. A button text is represented by this kind of blue text, which shows, hey, you probably should click on this. The story continues here. If I click on that, it's going to lead me to my second passage. I haven't edited and adjusted that second passage yet. There's also a back button that will come up as well that will take us back. And then now that I have clicked that initial button to begin with to go to the second page, there's a forward button that I can go back and forth. So there's a back and forward button as well. Let's close that out. All right, so that's how we can create new passages. I'm going to get the second passage that is titled The Story Continues here. And I can replace this. This story is a day in the life of 3 kids. Okay. And these 3 kids could have a different page. So the main part about Twine is to make it interactive and non-linear. Non-linear means that there's multiple ways that the audience or the player can choose what to do with the story. There's not one choice throughout every occasion. So what we're going to do is we're going to have, we'll call the first character Ned, we'll call the next one Bob, and the next one Sally. So we're going to have 3 characters, Ned, Bob, and Sally. And we'll say above that, to give some indication, click on the kid to learn more about their day. Okay. So this is our first interactive point where we're going to have multiple choices that the audience can choose which one of these characters they want to do. So I want to convert these 3 kids' names into new passages that are buttons. So let's do 2 left brackets to the left of Ned, 2 right brackets to the right of Ned, 2 left brackets to the beginning of Bob, 2 right brackets to the end of Bob. Same thing for Sally. So the straight brackets allow us to be able to create new passages. All right, so let's click off of that. So now I have 3 different options. This is called a branching story structure. So the first starting one is my story start. The next one goes to a single choice secondary page. Then from this second page, we have 3 choices, and that leads us to 3 different sub pages. So let's test that out. Let's hit play. I'm going to come here to interactive test story, hit play, and then from the story continues here, let's click on that. The story is a day in the life of 3 kids. Click on the kid to learn more. If I click on one, it'll go to Ned's page. If I go back, if I click on the second one, it'll go to Bob's page. Click on the third one, it'll go to Sally's page. Okay, so let's end our play. So the simple thing to do is we can come in here and add some different information into each one of these and then create text buttons from them. There's a secondary way that we can change the text of the button, and that is to, instead of saying, well, we want it to display Ned, but perhaps we don't want the next passage to be named Ned. So I'm going to come in here and let's just delete these in here. Let's just remove these back out. If I delete these out, it will create sometimes blank links like that. So it shows you that there's meant to be a link there, but there's nothing there. So instead, just going to move these back out and we'll recreate these. What we can do is we want the button click to be called Ned. So we will still put our left and right brackets on there. But what we can do is after the word Ned, if we want the passage to be called something different than Ned, I can hit spacebar and just a straight bracket, no corners on the end of it. So that would be shift and the button above enter. So that straight line, vertical line. And then we can type in what we want the passage name to be. So we can say Ned character. There we go. So maybe we want the passage name to be different than what the button actually says. So let's do that instead. So we're going to do left brackets. We'll do space and straight line. And we'll do Bob character. So where it says Bob character, that's going to be the passage name. But the text that we see when we click on that is just going to say Ned. left bracket, right bracket, and we're going to do space, straight line, Sally, character. All right, so now I'm going to click off. It creates a passage called Ned character, Bob character, Sally character. But when I will see this page, it's just going to show Ned, Bob, or Sally. Let's play. All right, story continues here. So it just says Ned, Bob, or Sally, but it doesn't say Ned character. So that's another way we can make an adjustment to the code to change what text we actually see here. So if you wanted to add a question or a comment or an action or action verb or something like that, we can do that instead of just typing the passage name. All right, so finally, we can say in Ned characters passage, this is Ned. Okay, and then under here we can say this is Bob. And under this one we can say this is Sally. Okay. All right, so that way when I hit play and I actually go into Ned's page, it says something. This is Ned. So in the next couple of videos, we'll talk about how to add images in here, and we'll put an image of what we might want Ned to look like in here. We can go back and choose Bob. We'll put an image of Bob in here. We can go back and we can choose Sally and put an image of Sally in here, and then give choices of what the player audience can do as they get to each character. So that's how this Twine interactive story can really be an interesting way to deliver content, as far as you're allowing the audience to make a choice in where the story goes. And that's what's called nonlinear storytelling. That'll wrap up this video. The next video we'll come back and talk about how to incorporate images into Twine. One other thing I wanted to mention before we close up here is as you continue to work on this, you can hit the back button. There really is no need to save this, but if you hit the back button, here's my Twine preview now. You can see it's more reminiscent of the preview of my graph. So if I click on that again, it saved everything. But as long as you're still working in that web browser that you started this in, you can just make your adjustments and then back out. If you wanted to save this out, work on it on a different computer, or save it to a cloud network or something like that, you would need to click on the name on the bottom left of that Twine and choose Publish to File. So when you do that, it will create an HTML file that you can then load back into Twine. If you click on that, it opens it up as a web page. So this is actually loaded from my downloads as an HTML file, and it'll work the same exact way. But to edit the code in Twine without having to use full HTML or CSS, then you'll need to load this back into Twine on a different computer. You don't have to load it back into this web browser that you started it on. All you have to do is just open up the web browser again. Pending that you don't delete the history or your cookies, it will save all of the content in here. You can continue working on it. All right, that'll wrap up this video.